blessed day to all of you. My report is all about Ludwig Wittgenstein and his contribution on philosophy. A lot of unhappiness comes about in this world because we can't let other people know what we mean clearly enough. One of the philosophers who can help us with our communication problems is Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was a recluse. He had a stutter, paused for ages in the middle of his sentences, and he had a habit of storming out if he didn't like what people were saying. It was weirdly the ideal background for someone intent on studying how easily communication between people goes wrong. Ludwig Wittgenstein was one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. He made a major contribution to conversations on language, logic, and metaphysics, but also ethics, the way that we should live in the world. He published two important books, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus in 1921 and the Philosophical Investigations in 1953, for which he is best known. These were major contributions to 20th century philosophy of language. Ludwig Wittgenstein was born Vienna in 1889 and the youngest child of a wealthy, highly cultured but domineering steel magnate. Three of Ludwig's four brothers took their own lives, and Ludwig himself was frequently troubled by suicidal thoughts. In 1908, he began his studies in aeronautical engineering at Manchester University, where his interest in philosophy of mathematics led him to Frege. Upon Frege's advice, in 1911, he went to Cambridge to study with Bertrand Russell. After studying at Cambridge, his father died and he inherited a lot of money. He gave it all away, mainly to his already very rich relatives, and went to live in Spartan solitude in Norway. He is also a member of the Austrian army during World War I in 1914. He was taken captive in 1918 and spent the remaining months of the war at the prison camp. It was during the war that he wrote the notes and drafts of his first important work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. After the war, the book was published in German and translated into English. It was a short, beautiful, and baffling work. The big question that Wittgenstein asked in it is, how do human beings manage to communicate ideas to one another? And his answer, which felt revolutionary, is that language works by triggering within us pictures of how things are in the world. Wittgenstein thought of this while reading a newspaper article about a Paris court case in which, in order to explain with greater efficacy the details of an accident that had taken place at a road junction, the court had arranged for the accident to be reproduced visually using model cars and pedestrians. It was a eureka moment. In Wittgenstein's view, words enables us to make pictures of facts. To say, the palm tree is by the shore, paints a rapid sketch that, like the model, lets another person see the situation in their mind and understand. We're constantly swapping pictures between us, but the Paris court needed to resort to an actual model for a very important reason. Because on the whole, we are very bad at managing to make good pictures in the minds of others. Communication typically goes wrong because other people have, as we put it, the wrong picture that we're meaning. It can take an age for two people to realize divergences over quite basic things. Problems of communication typically start because we don't have a clear and accurate picture of what we mean in our own heads. We say quite meaningless or modelador and elaborated things which therefore can go nowhere in the minds of others. There is another danger that we read more than meaning into the words of others than they ever intended or than is warranted. You tell your partner you had a conversation with an interesting person at the hotel reception. The picture in your mind is an innocent one, but your partner swiftly forms a very different impression. The Tractatus is a plea by a very taciturn, silent and precise Austrian philosopher to speak more carefully and less impulsively. As he famously put it, when he published it, Wittgenstein thought somewhat grandly that the Tractatus was the last work of philosophy that would ever need to be written. So he looked around for how to fill the rest of his life. He turned to architecture and spent a couple of years designing a house for his sister in Vienna. He spent ages getting the door handles and radiators right. Very late on in the project, he got increasingly bothered about the ceiling in one of the rooms and came to the conclusion that it was too low. At immense inconvenience to everyone, he insisted on having it raised by 3 centimeters. It made all the difference, he thought. Then, in 1929, Wittgenstein suddenly returned to Cambridge and to philosophy because he realized he had some new things to say about language and communication. It was a short, beautiful, and baffling work. And so he began to write a second book published posthumously and that we know as Philosophical Investigations. Instead of thinking that language is only just about pictures, he developed the idea that language is like a kind of tool that we use to play different games, which doesn't literally mean games, more patterns of intentions. So, if a parent says to a frightened child, "Don't worry, everything's gonna be fine," they can't know it really will be fine. They aren't playing the rational prediction from available facts game. They are playing another game, the words as an instrument of comfort and security game. Wittgenstein's point is that all kinds of misunderstandings arise when we don't see which kind of game someone is involved in. If one's partner says, "You never help me, you're so unreliable," the natural inclination might be to hear this as a part of a stating the facts game, like saying, "The Battle of Waterloo was in 1815. So one might respond by citing facts about how actually you got the car insurance yesterday and you bought some vegetables at lunchtime too. But actually, this person is involved in a different language game. They are using words not to capture facts. They are playing the help and reassurance game. So, in the language game, they are involved in 'you never help' means I want you to be more nurturing." Working out the game in question is Wittgenstein's realized key to good communication. In the philosophical investigation, Wittgenstein also wanted to draw attention to how much of our self-understanding depends on the words of others, on languages that have developed publicly and communally over many centuries long before we are born. For example, on Sunday afternoon, I might fall prey to a worried, confused mood as I think about the week ahead and everything I've got to do. My ability to know this very private side of myself and to help others know me will be hugely enhanced if I have to hand a word that's been around a while: angst. A word which was helpfully formulated by the philosopher Kierkegaard in 19th century Copenhagen. Words like angst are also nostalgia, melancholy, or ambivalent, and many others help us to name elusive areas of our own experience. Language is a public tool for the understanding of private life. The richness of the language we're exposed to is therefore really important to our self-knowledge. Reading many books gives us tools with which to help to know who we are. Though a lot of Wittgenstein's philosophy is deeply complicated, it's underpinned by a desire always to be helpful. The task of philosophy, said Wittgenstein's, is to show the fly the way out of the fly battle. The particular fly battle he was interested in was language. And before his death from cancer in 1951, he managed to let out for us a lot of word flies usefully for us all. Originally, there were two commonly recognized stages of Wittgenstein's thought, the early and the later, both of which were taken to be pivotal in their respective periods. The early Wittgenstein, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. In this, the book addresses the central problems of philosophy which deal with the world, thought, and language, and represents a solution of these problems that is grounded in logic and in the nature of representation, sense and nonsense. In the Tractatus, Wittgenstein's logical construction of a philosophical system has a purpose to find the limits of the world, thought, and language. In other words, to distinguish between sense and nonsense. The nature of philosophy. Accordingly, the word philosophy must mean something which stands above or below, but not beside the natural sciences. Interpretative problems. The Tractatus is notorious for its interpretative difficulties. In the decades that have passed since its publication, it has gone through several waves of general interpretations. The later Wittgenstein, Transition and Critique of Tractatus. In this, what marks the transition from early to later Wittgenstein can be summed up as the total rejection of dogmatism, as the working out of all the consequences of this rejection. Philosophical investigation. The philosophical investigation proceeds to offer the new way of looking at language, which will yield the view of philosophy as therapy, meaning as use. For a large class of cases of the employment of the word meaning, though not for all, this word can be explained in this way. The meaning of a word is its use in the language. Language, games, and family resemblance. Throughout the philosophical investigations, Wittgenstein returns again and again to the concept of language games to make clear his lines of thought concerning language, rule following, and private language. One of the issues most associated with the later Wittgenstein is that of rule following. Rising out of the considerations above, it becomes another central point of the discussion in the question of what it is that can apply to all the uses of a word. Grammar and form of life. Grammar, usually taken to consist of the rules of correct syntactic and semantic usage, becomes, in Wittgenstein's hands, the wider and more elusive network of rules which determine what linguistic move is allowed as making sense and what isn't. The nature of philosophy. In his later writings, Wittgenstein holds, as he did in the Tractatus, that philosophers do not or should not supply a theory, neither do they provide explanations. Philosophy just puts everything before us and neither explains nor deduces anything. Since everything lies open to view, there is nothing to explain. After the investigations, the general tenor of all the writings of this last period can thence be viewed as, on the one hand, a move away from the critical positions of the investigations to a more positive perspective on the same problems that had been facing him since his early writings. On the other hand, this move does not constitute a break from the later period but is more properly viewed as its continuation in a new light. So that's all, everyone. I hope you have learned something from my report. Thank you and God bless you.